Hello, everyone, and welcome to another UCAT lesson. So actually, today is just going to follow on from the other previous lessons which I've taught regarding the basic introductions to sections. So as you know, we've already gone through the 5 basic sections: verbal reasoning, decision-making, quantitative reasoning, abstract reasoning, and also situational judgment. We've lumped them all together and everything in like a sort of introductory bundle. And now this is going to be the first lesson. We sort of just like try to branch out from the actual original introductory lessons themselves and just go into like a very specific topics. Today, it's going to be verbal reasoning with those 3 tips, as you might have seen in the title. Just before we go to everything, my freaking stomach hurts so much right now. I actually really need to take a fucking shit. Whoops, shouldn't have said that, but yeah, I'm just being real with you guys. I think I had like some milk or something. I went to a pasta restaurant yesterday actually, but I'm not going to call it the name actually, but I went to a pasta restaurant yesterday and I'm not sure what they had in the pasta, but my stomach is really hurting right now. I mean, it doesn't really matter, helps the diet. But anyway, so if I seem to grimace during the lesson, I really do apologize for that because my stomach is absolutely killing me right now. And yeah, I just hope that the smell of my own, wait, no, I don't want to mention that. But I hope that the pain doesn't distract me from the lesson. All right. So anyways, let's get started. So we're gonna go through it's not loading. Okay, there you go. Okay, it should be loading now. Okay. So pretty much today we're going to be going through the 3 fundamental verbal reasoning rules. So pretty much the idea of today's lesson is that there's going to be like 3 sorts of rules to verbal reasoning and everything, or 3 sort of tips that you must always follow, like basically rules or ideas that you need to complete the lesson or the section, sorry. So just bearing in mind that when I say rules, I don't mean like the rules of abstract reasoning. I just mean like the sort of things and ideas that you must follow for success in the section, or at the very least should follow. So I've just sort of slightly updated the PowerPoint and everything. So I want to say, so of course I still have my discounted private group UCAT tutoring and everything. You just follow that by actually going on the Tutor Finder link. By following the Tutor Finder link, you can just simply go on, see my profile, which I've recently updated as well. And in addition to that, you can just simply use those details that I have on the bottom to contact me and ask me any sort of questions that you want in regards to the UCAT, or actually just make inquiries within my tutoring and everything. And I would like to say that I've resulted in the success of many students as well. And I'm hoping you guys are willing to jump on board because there's so many exciting things I'm offering as a part of especially my group tutoring classes and everything. In addition to that, I just want to say as well, so right on the bottom of the PowerPoint slide is actually the link to my Discord community. So all these links you can find in the description, but I just want to say you can also see the link right here. And that's simply a community that I made for you to just join and everything and just be in a group of your UCAT peers and everything. And just simply bond and chat and just simply ask questions about the UCAT, because I do strongly believe it's very important for you all to be in a very supportive environment for your learning. In addition to that, I also upload notes, bonus resources as well, and also just a few comments on my YouTube videos. And of course, you can find out when another YouTube video is being posted. It's just a place where you can get free lesson resources pretty much. So I'd really suggest that you guys hop on there if you really want to. Okay. So now to the actual lesson overview. So it's going to be a sort of like small sort of lesson in terms of exactly what I want to discuss here, because it is just 3 tips. But I'm just going to go through just why you need express rules. So why am I actually telling you some rules and asking you to actually remember them? As opposed to just simply saying, well, this is how you do the question, do this, this, and that. Why am I actually getting you guys express rules? Our 3 rules right here: no extrapolation, do not keyword hunt, and pay attention to keywords, and the final summary. So, of course, those are like little bits right there. But then the thing is that, of course, I want you guys to actually watch and read into it, because the thing is that you need to actually have a read for it all to make sense. Now, I made this PowerPoint pretty cleanly, I think, so I'm really hoping that the PowerPoint actually looks okay. I feel like I did, but we'll see if I made any mistakes in the tiresomeness of the night. Anyways, so why do you actually need express rules? So I'm just going to start by just simply explaining what an express rule actually is and everything. And pretty much it's an express rule is not like an official UCAT term. It's a term that I personally use. And the idea is that it's a rule where you basically just want to like flesh out something you actually want to like physically, tangibly describe with words, as opposed to sort of like keeping it internalized. It's not like, oh, you think to yourself, oh, okay, yeah, you don't even like even bring it up. You just think, okay, yeah, that makes sense. This is what I do. Or like, when you answer like a true, false, can't tell question, you're like, yeah, that kind of looks true, without actually thinking about as to why it is. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that I'm really asking you guys to really bring it out and really think about that actual rule and everything, rather than just keep it as something where like, you kind of feel that it's kind of correct and everything. You kind of feel that that's right, looks right and everything. I want you to actually understand the actual underlying processes of why it's actually correct. And the reason why I want you guys to understand the processes as to why it's correct is because express rules actually give you a very clear approach to actual question solving. So with express rules, you know exactly what to do. You're like, okay, well, you know, I wouldn't do extrapolation. I'll make sure I don't keyword hunt or something like that. Actually making sure you actually have an actual logical set path to follow, in contrast to not having a set of express rules, which means that you're going to be doing questions of instinct. Like, you know, the classic, oh, yeah, this kind of feels like it's right. Like, you know, I feel like it's correct and everything. And the thing is that because of that, you're just going to hone to random things. You don't actually have like a set structure of what to do. You're just like, yeah, okay, looks kind of right. You don't really hone into the right points. And then, of course, you naturally get more questions wrong. And of course, you can prevent that by just simply knowing these sort of core rules, which is actually very important. So why not just simply go for that? But anyway, and also, I'm going to give you guys 3 core rules and tips, which I've already introduced previously. And it's going to be given this lesson for you to actually memorize and apply to text. So I want you to actually memorize these sorts of rules and everything, and definitely try to understand how it works. The idea behind all of these sorts of mini lessons that I offer online and everything is that so you can actually understand exactly what's going on and actually do the questions and explain it yourself. So I don't want you to just simply come back to me if you need help. I want you to be so knowledgeable in this that you can go and explain it to someone else. All right. So the first rule now, so onto the rules. The first rule is actually the no extrapolation rule. And of course, you have examples to see exactly what I mean by this. So the first rule is this no extrapolation rule. And it just involves you just simply not extrapolating information from the text or bring in any external knowledge. So that's actually 2 very important points, okay? So no extrapolating information from the text and no bringing in any external knowledge. So I'm going to go through each individually. When I say extrapolate information, I mean like make like a very, very strong sort of like, I guess it's inference, so to say. It's like you're kind of like, for more like sort of basic terms and everything, you're really like, there's a term for this that's more regular. You're like kind of, I'll think of the word, but reaching, yeah. You're reaching. So it's just like you're really trying to like put words into like the text mouth and everything. You're like really reaching, trying to really push unnecessarily for like a point that doesn't really exist. You're sort of like really taking a piece of information, you kind of draw something for it, but it's not like an inference. You're actually like really pushing a bit too far for it. You're like, you know, trying to make something that's not there. And it kind of relates to the external knowledge rule. The idea of the external knowledge rule is that you only can use the information that the actual text gives you, okay? So this point is actually very important. You need to actually have to see the actual information, the text, before you can actually use it. You cannot use information that you personally knew before coming in and everything. You want to just simply go with what the text actually says, okay? So that's very important. And the sort of second point which kind of relates as well is just that, you know, the answer options actually may be literally correct and everything, but the thing is that the information they use would be extrapolated information or external information, which makes the actual answer option in terms of the answer that you choose for the UCAT test actually wrong. So I'll give you guys an example in a second. So we'll just keep going on. But I do want to make the delineation. So you can't extrapolate, but it's okay to actually do infer information. So an inference is just simply where you draw a reasonable conclusion. So it's like saying Ben and this other person, Joshua, went to go eat at a bar, something like that. They had 5 pieces of candy to pay, and then they use 2 pieces of candy to pay, and then you kind of infer that they have 3 left and everything. So you're kind of like drawing a reasonable, proper, logical conclusion. But you don't want to actually extrapolate, okay? So extrapolation is when you bring in unreasonable information, when you try to push way too hard, when you try to reach information that's not there. And of course, extrapolation can be using external information, though not necessarily always. External information is just like you're completely grabbing it from your head. Extrapolation is kind of like you're getting information, but you're kind of drawing a bit too much on it. It's not really guaranteed. You aren't really drawing any reasonable conclusion. You're sort of like really pushing and trying a bit too hard and everything. It kind of maybe not entirely external information, but you're pushing too hard to reach for it. But of course, you can have that situation where they're both external pieces of information in addition to extrapolated information. And the example here that I want to sort of say is, so pretty much, if the text, say, talks about China, and let's just say and emphasize that it's in the Northern Hemisphere, and the text does not mention that it's in the Northern Hemisphere, okay? So it doesn't actually mention it's in the Northern Hemisphere. It means that you cannot actually use that in your answer. So if it says that China is a country in the Northern, if the text does not say that China is a country in the Northern Hemisphere, and answer option uses that sort of idea that China is in the Northern Hemisphere. It says something like China is a country in the Northern Hemisphere, even though you personally know it's correct, does not actually mean you can actually choose that answer option and everything. You can't actually choose Northern Hemisphere as an answer option because you didn't actually get that information from the text. In fact, a little extra spin of this is sometimes the text likes to tell you wrong information deliberately. So the text might say something wrong, such as China is in the Southern Hemisphere. And actually, if it says that China is in the Southern Hemisphere, and you're given a question saying, which of the following statements is true, and then it says China is in the Southern Hemisphere, then you actually should go with that because you have to use only the information the text tells you. You may know externally that the actual questions and the actual idea that China is a country in the Southern Hemisphere is wrong, but then the thing is that it was not in the text. Instead said that it was in the Southern Hemisphere. So you need to go with that. But I want to say that that's a bit more of a rare and special variation because usually these texts are sort of like copied from other sources and everything. They're very much based in reality. So they don't like to pretty much what I'm trying to say is they don't make up stuff. They literally copy the text from online sources. And obviously that means that they, they're online real sources. So you can't make BS information there. Sorry, I swore. You can't make wrong information there. And it's reality-based. If they do try to write it, it's going to be reality-based. It's going to be based in reality. They're not going to make up some stuff there as well. All of it will actually just be usually based in a real situation and everything. Because I guess they don't really want to confuse you. And why would you just spend your time trying to write some lies or something? But yeah, so that's important. And actually, this is a very common UCAT trick, especially for questions about which of the following answer options are true, false. So the question is going to ask you, I'm not saying these are true, false, can't tell questions. I'm actually saying the question is asking you which of the following answer options are true. And you're going to find that some answer options may not actually be entirely in the text. You might find that they're extrapolated and external, or they use external information, which means you don't sort of use that information to actually answer, or you don't say that it's correct answer. It's very important that you actually do that. All right, so here's an example and everything. So here's the sort of no extrapolation rule in action. And pretty much here's a text about this sort of scope or something like that two people end up making. It's this sort of there's kaleidoscopes, something, when you look at them, you can kind of see a moving image, and they're talking about it being the start of photography. I'm not really here to talk to you about that. My sort of point here is that here's the sort of question they ask you and everything. So which are the following facts about Joseph Plateau? Which are the following facts about Joseph Plateau is true? And the thing is that here's this answer option D, Plateau knew von Stamfer. And actually, this answer option is actually correct if we consider the real life situation. Because I went on Wikipedia to sort of double check on this. And it seems that Plateau definitely did know von Stamfer, or at least he knew of von Stamfer, which means that that is technically the true information. But if you actually read the text and everything, you don't actually get any sort of evidence that Plateau actually knew von Stamfer. And because of that, you can't actually end up choosing the answer option D. Because the thing is that, yes, you do know externally, but they didn't actually mention in the text. So you can't actually use that, okay? And which of the following facts about Joseph Plateau is true? Look at this classic question, which I told you guys, which of the following facts is true. It's a very classic sort of thing, okay? So it's very important that you don't actually extrapolate information or bring in external information. I want to say as well that this is from Medify UK, and all these examples are from Medify UK as well. I'm starting to use these because these are just objectively the better examples to use. And I'd like to remind you guys, I'm an ambassador to the Medify UK as well. So if you guys would definitely like a few tips or just a few suggestions, please let me know and I can help you out with that as well. Alrighty. So here is another rule, okay? So here is another rule. The rule number 2 is do not keyword hunt, okay? So do not keyword hunt. And this is going to be a bit distinct from when I say do not keyword hunt in another question, but that's going to be something I mentioned later. So this is actually so important and everything, and an absolute fundamental that I teach all of my students and everything from day one. Because this has always remained true from 2019. And even though they made the text longer and everything, it still remains true. You need to adapt in a different way. No, you don't go back to this. Honestly, I'll say the word shit technique. I really hate this technique and I really hate the fact that it's taught. But let me just actually explain what the technique actually is before I start hating on it and seem to bash it so much. So the second rule is not to keyword hunt when solving questions, okay? And this, simply put, refers to the technique that is so commonly given, where pretty much you look for the questions first, you look for keywords of the questions and also the answer options, and you sort of go right back to the text, not actually reading the text properly, and you're simply doing a keyword scan or a keyword hunt in the text to find those keywords to actually answer them, okay? And this is a very common yet flawed technique. So in my sort of you know, like assessment of like a combination of resources, I actually ended up finding that many websites just could not stop talking about this sort of technique. And there are some websites that actually aren't on the dark side and they actually don't use this technique, but there are so many websites which do, especially like the UK ones. And oh, no surprise, it's because the UK has lower standards for the UCAT. Oh, wow. But anyways, so yeah, the idea of them just giving you this technique is just to give you a method to do questions. Because, you know, it's true. It gives you a method to do questions and everything. It lets you at least answer like 60% of the questions, right? But then the thing is that it's like one of those low risk, low reward strategies. So pretty much it's historically led to terrible marks because the thing is that while you can actually use this to get by, and yeah, you know, if you had no idea what you're doing, it's doing that technique is better than doing nothing. You get like maybe 50 or 60%, but that's a terrible mark and everything. You're capped to kind of like 50 or 60%. You can't really go to 70%, 80%, 90%, 100%. And actually, you do kind of need to get an average of 75% of the questions right to even have a chance in Australia. In the UK, it's a bit less, but you know, I'm going to try to orient this a little bit more to Australia for this point, especially. It's historically led to terrible marks. You will actually do terrible if you do this technique overall. You may not do it as bad as if you were to just go and flailing, but definitely you put in low risk and you don't get that much reward. You're going to just end up capping out at 60%. Your cap is actually much lower than other techniques, which will actually have you cap much higher. And fundamentally, the reason why this is such a bad technique is just because of the fact that it's very commonly, the keywords are very commonly changed between the questions and answers and the text. You will not find the same keywords between the questions and answers and text. In fact, the UCAT deliberately changes the keywords between the answers and text. This has actually been proven. They deliberately change the keywords between the questions and answers to the text because they don't like it when you keyword hunt. They want you to actually understand and interpret the text properly, not do this cheap keyword hunting. So they deliberately change the keywords between the actual answers and the text and everything. So it's actually very, very important to actually note that you can't actually keyword hunt. Well, you shouldn't actually keyword hunt and everything. So it's very important that you don't do this, okay? And keyword hunting is not actually completely invalid. I want to say that though, it's not completely invalid. It has potential, but you need to only combine it with other techniques. You can't use it by itself because literally it's a technique by itself. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to keyword hunt. I'm going to get you guys to read the keywords and the questions and answers. And then after that, you're going to look at the keywords and the text. Literally the only technique. That itself is terrible. But actually, if you were to use this technique in combination with other reading techniques, which I'll tell you about in another video, it's actually pretty good. And it's actually important for that as well. So it's a bit of a mix, okay? So I guess in reality, the rule should be do not keyword hunt by itself. And there's actually a much better technique of rule and everything to approach verbal reasoning, text, and questions. A much, much better one, but I'm going to discuss that in a future video. And honestly, I'm not even too sure if I really want to do that because it's specially reserved for my classes as well. But there is a much better technique that sort of combines keyword hunting and many other important elements as well. It's a much better technique and I guess a rule for reading. But I guess it's more of a technique because the thing is that, you know, there's no real rule for reading. It's what works best for you, but it can vary slightly. But I do think this is a solid technique. It's worked for me and it's worked for many of my students as well. Anyways, so that's that. I'm gonna give you guys an example now, literally right here. So I've literally highlighted for you guys. So here's a text about minimum wage laws and everything. It's kind of history in general and how it's just sort of like, you know, came to like the United States and everything and like the history of it being implemented in the United States. That's not the point. The point is that, so the question right here is, which of the following is not put forward by the passage as an argument against the minimum wage? So which idea is actually not put forward as, so which has not been mentioned in the text pretty much as like an argument between the minimum wage? So you're looking for an answer which is not actually mentioned in the text. And actually, you look right here. So let's say you sort of look at this keyword hunting technique. You look at this one over here. It curbs a fundamental freedom. Okay, so the keywords here like curbs, fundamental freedom. You look back in the text, you'll see nothing about curbs. You won't see literally the word curbs. You won't see the word fundamental freedom or anything, okay? But then the thing is that, so you're thinking to yourself, well, that's not mentioned in the text, so I'm going to choose A because it was not mentioned. But that's wrong because it actually turns out they did mention that. But they mentioned that in a slightly different way. And I point you to this sentence right here. A limit on their agency as profit seekers and everything, right? Agency meaning like freedom and everything, and profit seekers being like, you know, making money. Limit meaning like sort of like a limit, like a ban, like a sort of like, you know, a peak, like, you know, cap, right? And actually, those two ideas, if you read the entire text, you actually see that those, you know, those two ideas actually, they're meant to be like re-expressions of the same idea. It curbs the fundamental freedom. stopping, like, of rights for these people. A limit of the agency is profit seekers, so preventing their freedom or preventing their, like, their sort of like allowances of profit seekers. So in a sense as well, preventing their rights as profit seekers. They're both similar. They're both just simply different ways right here. So I write it right here. It's just simply very similar in the idea, and therefore it would be the correct answer to choose in terms of which of the following is not put forward, but it's just simply reworded differently. It's a different way of expressing the same idea. And if you just simply read through this text and everything, and you just simply keyword hunt, you're not going to actually do that. You need some sort of understanding so you can establish the connection that these two ideas are the exact same. It's literally a rule. It's on Medify UCAT. Well, it's not literally a rule, but it's so important. I personally think it's very important. I've seen many of my friends when they did the UCAT and many students who actually come into my lessons doing this technique, and they're wondering why they only ever peak with like 20 out of 40, 20 out of like, the 44 marks. And they're like, they've been studying for so long. They've been studying for like, a year, but they just can't seem to improve. That is why you're not improving in everything. There's a better technique out there, and I'm excited to potentially teach it to you in a video, but definitely in a lesson. It's literally in my first lesson for the UCAT, and maybe I'll upload the PowerPoint on YouTube, but don't, or just the teaching video, but I definitely wouldn't rely on me doing that, to say the least. But anyways, the third rule though, so this is actually a very, very important sort of rule as well, but I use the same sort of phrase keywords here, so I'm going to be very careful, because actually I sort of mean something different when I say this, and I'm trying to delineate that by splitting up keywords to key and words. So the third rule is to actually pay attention to key words, okay? So I'll mention right here again, the third and final rule to be discussed is that you must always pay attention to key words that are given to both the text and the question, the actual question they ask you, which is the following statements are true, for example, and the actual answer options as well. And what I'm trying to say is that you should be reading the text carefully so you can capture every single word. Read the text carefully and read the question answer combos carefully so you can capture every single word. And I don't mean like actually understanding and being like, okay, dissecting all that, because you'll find that you can't actually read the text in time and everything like that. It'll take way too long. But it's just about just sort of like noticing every single word and being like, okay, well, they mentioned not there or something. So basically just making sure you're catching up the main sort of points here and everything, the main sort of key words, capturing all those key words. And these key words include words such as many, maybe, none, some, all, not, cannot, few, and little. And there are actually many different keywords that they have out there. There's actually plenty of different keywords that they actually have in everything. Oh, sorry, keywords that they have out there. But these are 9 quick examples that I've given you, and these are quite common ones. I might have missed a few of the common ones, but definitely those words right here are quite commonly used, I think. Well, at least most of them are quite commonly used and everything. You got to pay attention to these ones. And it's actually very important to actually pay attention to these key words, because the thing is that the actual meaning of an answer can actually be very opposite, or at least it's very different to what is expressed in the text. So you can literally, by simply taking one key word that is actually present in the text, or at least just varying in the text, okay? So pretty much what I'm trying to say is that you could literally get the exact sentence in the text and just simply replace one key word and put it in the answer and say, which of the following statements are true is the question. And that answer will now be completely wrong, because either it's now opposite to the actual original meaning or it's very different. So by changing that one key word, you're actually making the opposite answer, or opposite in terms of its meaning, or very different. And obviously, if it's asking you which of the following statements are true, it becomes very wrong, okay? So very important to pay attention to these key words. And in fact, the UCAT actually deliberately messes around with these key words to actually trick you to actually reduce scoring. So they actually very much like to include lots of nots, not being one of the most common one. They like to include many, they like to include maybe, they like to include some, none, all. They love to include these key words and everything in their questions to trick you, to try to trick you. And this is more permeant, this is more clear in decision making, but it's here in verbal reasoning as well. They definitely try to mess around with these key words a lot. They really, 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 really do. I'm not kidding. You'll see an example, they really like to do that. So this is a very common thing the UCAT does, and it's very important you guys are aware of that. And obviously, I just want to emphasize one more time, it's very different to the keywords as I mentioned earlier and everything. When I was talking about keywords, I mean like picking out like distinct sort of like just specific words representing points and everything. So they could be any sort of words or anything. Whereas when I say key words, I mean like sort of like, these sorts of like little words right here, like many, maybe, some, none, all, not, that sort of stuff, right? So there you go. So very important to pay attention to key words. That's the third rule. Okay, and here's an example right here and everything. And actually, so this is from Medify UK, and this is the pay attention to keywords rule. And actually, this is a text about vaccination and everything, about like, the history of vaccines and, just like vaccine controversies. But again, that's not the point. I don't know why I keep explaining the text, but that's not the point. So here's a question. So which of the following, based on the passage, which of the following claims are supported in this vaccine book? And because it's about a book, right? And here's one of the answer options and everything they propose. Enemies of the government had the smallpox virus used for bioterrorism. So pretty much the idea is that the question is asking us which of the following statements can we kind of see in the text? And, here's a statement about the enemies of the US government having the smallpox vaccine to actually use virus to use for bioterrorism. And you read the text right here, and actually, right here, look at this in the second paragraph. So I've underlined it. It's actually in the first line of the first paragraph. The book begins by George W. Bush receiving the smallpox vaccine in 2002, given that it was thought by Bush and his aides that enemies of the US government, particularly Saddam Hussein, might possess the virus, okay? Might possess the virus, okay? And the thing is that that's actually very important. So you're like, okay, I see that and everything. So yeah, they're talking about might possess the virus and everything. So yep, had the smallpox virus used for bioterrorism. So that looks like it's been supported in the text. Choose D, but then if you do that, you're going to be wrong. And the reason why is I sort of bolded it here. So notice a different change in the keywords here. There's a small change in the keywords right here, or the key words right here. Literally in the answer, they say had, but then in the actual text, they say might, okay? And remember, we only can use information the text actually gave us and everything. And as far as the text actually said that multiple rules combining. So as far as the text is actually concerned right here, he only might have had the virus. And the answer suggesting he actually had the virus. They're just one different word right here, but the meaning is completely changed. This answer is now wrong because he said might, so it's like a chance. This answer option is actually suggesting absolutely he had it and everything, which is not necessarily the case. And that's why this answer option becomes wrong. See how one word has changed the entire meaning and everything? It comes from like a right, like, like, oh, he had like, he had like a 60% chance or something like that, to like, this wrong sort of idea that he had 100%. So this means that D is now suddenly wrong, okay? And I sort of re-emphasize that point right here. The answer says he had the smallpox virus, but the text says might possess the virus. So the answer is actually not true because we cannot confirm that. It was only a might. One small word change, just one small word change has now made the answer factually incorrect, which is so important. And, just that one word change has caused people to get the question wrong. And actually, I have done this text and I did see on the actual platform that people did get it wrong because of this sort of situation right here. Okay, so be very careful. All right, so now to the final summary and everything. It was a relatively quick video because it's just 3 quick points right here. So just very importantly and very quickly, it's very important to have a set and directly stated approach to verbal reasoning with these sorts of rules to actually bring out these rules. Otherwise, you won't have a clear path to answer and you'll go off on a whim. You'll sort of be like, oh yeah, it kind of feels like it's right. And if you go off a whim, you'll miss key parts and sort of an understanding how to do the question. You end up picking randomly and that will result you in getting far more questions incorrect. And there are 3 fundamental rules followed for verbal reasoning, which are actually introduced here and everything. So 3 fundamental rules, which I've introduced right here. So the first rule is the no extrapolation rule. You cannot actually extrapolate information or use external information. You cannot like draw very, very strong, ridiculous conclusions that don't actually have any basis. You can't be reaching, so to say. You can't be doing that. You cannot use external information. You can't be drawing in extra information from the text. You only can use what the text tells you at the max, inferring and everything. The second rule is do not keyword hunt, okay? So don't try to scan for keywords in the questions and answers and go back to the text for those keywords in order to actually see where those keywords are and everything. And then from there, find where those keywords are. And then from there, choose the actual answer option based off that. It's a widely taught yet terrible technique because of the fact that they like to change keywords between the actual question and answer combo and the text. The third and final rule is to pay attention to keywords. So when I say these keywords, they're actually different to keywords, and they actually involve basic words, including not, versus like keywords, which are basically, just like direct points and everything, which are kind of like choosing sort of like, words that represent direct points, which is sort of like trying to go back to the text to find. And that's so important because the answers actually change with keywords, and the UCAT commonly uses keywords to trick students because of the fact that the meaning can change so vastly with just a change in one key word. Okay, So that's just the entire summary for the lesson. That brings us to the conclusion of the lesson. So sort of very quick reminder and everything to actually that I do offer discounted private UCAT tutoring, group tutoring for the UCAT. You can just access that through my tutor finder page. It's been recently updated. You can find my credentials there, and you can find my contact details there to ask me any questions about this video, or just simply inquire about joining a UCAT private program or UCAT group program. The programs are all ready and everything, and they're just all about actually just teaching. And there's so many great initiatives I got planned for you guys if you decide to join. Which I've got to keep secret for now. The second part of it here is just an online Discord UCAT community. If you want to join the lessons, you can at least join the UCAT community just by using this link. You find both of these links in the description below. And the idea is that this is like an online community where you can just be in a community of UCAT learners. You can also just chat, mingle, have fun, just empathize with each other, or just sort of like trauma bond over the difficulty of the UCAT and everything. You can ask me questions because I've got question servers, see what questions other people ask and see how I answer them. You also can get access to extra bonus resources as well, which I'll be uploading. Yes, sometimes there might actually be full lesson PowerPoints, which students would sometimes need to pay money for, but don't actually necessarily rely on that because I want to make everyone's time worth it. Okay, so that'll actually wrap up today's video and everything because I really need to go to the bathroom. My stomach was hurting the entire time, but I stuck it up for you guys because I just love you guys that much. But anyway, so that will conclude today's video. And remember to score 3,000, you aim for 3,600. Love you all. Bye-bye.